Why should we single out Spadina as a remarkable street in the city? Typical of Toronto, Spadina is an exceptional street that has been enriched over and over by the many waves of people who have inhabited it. The very name Spadina stands out from the surrounding street names in Toronto's downtown that are of obvious British origin. From the Ojibwe language, Spadina means house on the hill, and Dr. William Warren Baldwin laid out this avenue as Toronto's grandest and longest driveway. You can see if you look north. The hill is such a long way off that it is not visible. What has been so special about Spadina from the very beginning is its width. Spadina is 160 feet wide, expanded from an original 131 feet, which feels extensive today, and in 1813 would have seemed gigantic. Why such a wide street? We can only speculate. A vision for Toronto's Fifth Avenue? An attempt to raise the property values along the street for pieces of Dr. Warren's large lot that he wanted to sell? Dr. Baldwin was given the privilege of owning much of the western edge of early 19th century Toronto, then called York, due to fortunate circumstances. Baldwin served as physician to Peter Russell's family, who was president of legislature of Upper Canada and one of the jurisdiction's most senior officials. Dr. Baldwin, in addition to receiving one of the long lots that started at Queen and ran north for kilometers, also acquired additional large plots of land through marrying one of the Russell daughters, Phoebe. Look out for her street on the right. Baldwin, in his design for Spadina, gave Toronto one of its most fascinating street patterns, Spadina Crescent, a circle that Baldwin intended as a public park. You can see it when you look straight up the street, and we'll have more on that when we get there at the end of the tour. Please now ensure that you are standing on Queen Street West, north side, across from 489 Queen West, just at the corner of Queen and Vignali Street. Oddfellows Hall, 489 Queen Street West. Across the street we can see a building that tells its own story better than any other on this tour. Look up to that third story. Do you see some terracotta symbols engraved into the side of the building? These symbols all contain musical instruments intertwined with workers' tools. This was the Oddfellows Hall, a men's fraternity built in 1886. The men worked in trade jobs that would have used the working tools, and by night they would have danced to the music of these instruments. The top floor is especially tall to allow for singing, dancing, and socializing. CIBC Building, Queen Street West. When you're done at the hall, walk east along Queen Street West, stopping at the northwest corner of Queen and Spadina. Look across the corner to the CIBC building on the northeast corner. This building has stood the test of time as few others have on this tour. It was built as the Bank of Hamilton in 1902, and it worked so well that it still stands to this day as the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. Cross Spadina Avenue and walk east across the street to the CIBC building. Then turn north on Spadina until you come to the southeast corner of Spadina and Phoebe, and look across the street. Can you see the fur shop that is in a rundown old house? Imagine that 19th century Spadina would have been exclusively houses before any of these giant industrial buildings moved in. This photo gives a glance into pre-industrial Spadina, when residents could have enjoyed a beautiful, wide, tree-lined boulevard, most likely from the comfort of their horse and carriage. Continue north of Spadina on the east side of the street to 215 Spadina. Look at the lobby of this building, and we can see that the visionaries of Toronto did not die in the 19th century. This lobby is a testament to the creativity that thrives in Toronto in the early 21st century. Feel free to take in the bio wall and read about it on the northern wall of the lobby. Also take a few seconds to read through the list of building occupants. All sorts of wonderful creative and charitable organizations work here and give Toronto the creative ideas that make the city special. Continue north up Spadina to 239 and 241, formerly the Consolidated Glass Building. Step back to the edge of the sidewalk and try to look at this building from a few different vantage points. This building was designed by Pittsburgh architect William Steele in 1910 for the Consolidated Plate Glass Company. On the ornate gates you can still make out the letters CPG. The Beaux Arts building facade is of terracotta, red sandstone, and brick. Continue north on Spadina until you reach the thriving corner of Dundas and Spadina. Take a pause and look north across Dundas Street to the rear of the building now occupied by the Royal Bank, and note the large ceilinged elevation that protrudes from there. This is the performance space of what used to be the Mandarin Theater. We'll return to the Mandarin in a moment. Now cross Spadina, heading west, and then cross again to the northwest corner of Dundas and Spadina. Once you're done taking in Chinatown's busiest intersection of pedestrian traffic, perhaps Toronto's, perhaps even all of Canada's busiest, take in the Scotiabank in front of you. It's a building that gives the urban historian the most valuable clue in the world, an actual date. Before we tell you when this bank was built, why don't you take a look and try to guess? Is this consistent with 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s architecture? Now go around to the south side of the building at the west end. You should see your answer if you look up. Not looking too bad for a building of its age, hmm? The moral here is that the money business is the only one that truly stands the test of time. Once you've seen the date on the Scotiabank building, walk back east and look across Spadina, towards the east, at what is now the Royal Bank's front. This was the main entrance to the Mandarin Theatre. The first buildings on this particular corner were a church, and later a residential home, and at the end of the 1910s it was knocked down to make way for the Standard Theatre. The building was redesigned by Benjamin Brown, and it opened for business in 1921, hosting some of the best Yiddish theater anywhere outside of Europe. Brown himself is notable as Toronto's first Jewish architect. He graduated from the University of Toronto in 1913 and had completed 9 major buildings by 1930. Further down Spadina Avenue, south of Adelaide Street, the Tower, Fashion and Balfour buildings are all his designs. The theatre was financed entirely by the local Jewish community, who bought shares in the property and business. Comedy, drama, and tragedy were all presented on a regular basis, with touring companies and local groups both putting on dramatic presentations in Yiddish. Even the plays of Shakespeare and Strindberg were presented here in the Yiddish tongue to a very receptive audience. The Standard Theatre also participated in the politics of the day, hosting its share of political rallies and becoming an epicenter for the theater of action put on by the Progressive Arts Club, a left-wing group who liked their theater to carry a weighty message amongst its drama. Through events like these and in the hosting of left-wing rallies in a language other than English, an offense at the time, the theater got a reputation with the police, and there were numerous raids and arrests which led to the Progressive Arts Club being banned from the premises. With its political overtones dampened by the authorities, the building was renamed the Strand Theatre and became a full movie house, and in 1945 it was renamed the Victory and quickly became a burlesque theatre, and for 30 years entertained many generations of university students. In 1975, the building was purchased by a Chinese entrepreneur and began showing Chinese language cinema and was renamed the Golden Harvest Theatre, and then the Mandarin Theatre, before the projector finally went dark in the 1990s and the building was broken up into several smaller business spaces. Remain on the northwest corner of Dundas and Spadina and look south at the tall shopping center across from you. Now imagine that it wasn't there, and in its place was a large church that took up most of the present-day mall's lot. It was St. Elizabeth of Hungary Church, dedicated in that name in 1943. During 1956, the Hungarian population of Canada, and particularly Toronto, skyrocketed due to the Hungarian Revolution against Russian occupation in October of that year. The church became the religious and social center for Toronto's effort to help the newly arrived Hungarian refugees, and it was often their first point of contact. The Canadian-Hungarian Federation had their first headquarters here. With the migration and dispersal of the Hungarian community in subsequent decades, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto sold the church, and it was demolished and replaced by the shopping mall in the late 1980s. Now start walking north on Spadina, remaining on the west side of the street. As we continue our walk north, have a look at the laneway halfway up the block, called Glen Bailey Place. Walk down it right to the end. Isn't it remarkable that there are houses here? These houses follow a style that is consistent with the period from 1900 to the start of World War I. These were probably built by the newly arrived laborers who came to work in the surrounding garment industry buildings. Take a look to the south at one of the buildings that fronts onto Spadina. It is easy to see how such buildings could have once served as the heart of Toronto's once bustling textile industry. Once leaving Glen Bailey Place, continue north on Spadina to the southwest corner of St. Andrew and Spadina, and look back at the colorful buildings with 2 lions. This is probably the most difficult bit of historical imagining that we'll ask of you. This building's origins are as 2 houses, in fact, that housed the Labor Lyceum. This organization was sought to promote trade unionism and included several international needle trade unions. International Ladies Garment Workers, ILGWU, cloak makers and dressmakers, Amalgamated Clothing Workers, Fur Workers, and the Hat, Cap, and Millinery Workers Union. The two houses were renovated in 1929, and in 1950 the Lyceum added a second-floor dance hall that now houses the Bright Pearl restaurant. In 1972, the Lyceum moved to 23 Cecil Street, a few blocks northeast of here. Since then, the building underwent a renovation to its current Oriental theme and has been occupied by a series of Oriental restaurants. However, we can see the traces of the old building if we walk along St. Andrew to the back side. Keep walking around the building to the back alley, and you'll note the end of the facade, which is wrapped around the building like it's a wrapped gift. From the rear of the Labour Lyceum, continue west into Kensington Market, and walk west on St. Andrew to the corner of St. Andrew and Kensington Avenue. As you walk west, take note of the Minsker Synagogue on the north side of St. Andrew, built by the Beth Israel Anshi Minsk congregation, who were founded in Kensington in 1912, and in 1930 built the Minsker on land previously occupied by two houses owned by congregation members. Its congregation continues to be active, and it's a strong symbol of Kensington's long-time Jewish population. Kensington was first established by the Dennison family, from property they'd originally held as their own estate. After they sold off the property, homes were built through the area, and if you look up and down Kensington Avenue, you'll note one of the largest existing stretches of bay and gable design in Toronto. In 1900, Orthodox Jews began arriving in the area as they arrived from Europe and from the Ward, Toronto's first major Jewish community in the Dundas University area. With its low dwellings and village-like atmosphere, Kensington appealed to the newly arrived Jews with the flavor and style of a village or a shtetl. Many of the Jews who arrived from Europe came from smaller villages and towns that all had central marketplaces, and Kensington provided that kind of comfort to them. It was also a secure and friendly environment for Jewish immigrants, who weren't always welcome elsewhere in the city. By 1913, the Jewish population of the area had risen from 3,000 in 1900 to more than 32,000 people. Jews who lived in Kensington would often establish their own businesses. The small storefronts were a natural fit for independent businesses, and it was easier for Orthodox Jews to observe the Sabbath if they were working as their own bosses. The market would usually close completely Fridays at dusk and reopen Saturday nights. By 1931, 80% of Toronto's Jews lived in or near Kensington Market, and it was an area known for its tolerance. Indeed, it housed the only hotel in Toronto that would take black guests. Bylaws were gradually bent as the Victorian homes that lined Kensington Avenue were bought and renovated, acquiring storefronts and upstairs apartments. As you look up and down Kensington Avenue, you can still see those storefronts, now mostly second-hand clothing shops. After the war, the Jewish population of Kensington declined, and by 1961 was significantly reduced as new communities, notably the Portuguese, began settling there as the newest people to Canada, using the framework established by the Jews to continue Kensington's small village feel.